Hi, friends. So we've been talking about a certain experience in which we come to feel ourselves as bathing in divine love. Love that's experienced as divine because it's unconditional, because it seems to have no self-center, no self-concern, no self-regard. It seems to want nothing from itself, and yet to be concerned with our deepest nourishment and support. Seems to want to give itself to the gradual opening and unfolding of the deeper possibilities of our being. And this is an experience, we've said, that though spiritual, seems to be crucial to our psychological development, to the possibility of crossing over the developmental threshold from a mode of being in which we are stalked by persistent and pernicious doubts about our worth as human beings, about whether or not we belong. And about the significance of our lives. Two, a mode of being in which we have a fully formed sense of our individual worth and of the worth of others. A sense that not only immunizes us against those pernicious doubts, but that emboldens us to take emotional risks with ourselves and in relationship, to take creative risks with our own lives, and so to make ourselves deeply vulnerable, not only to others, but even to our own internal gaze, in the ways that are necessary for living a true and rich life. And we've said that this experience of finding ourselves, indeed rediscovering ourselves in the light of a divine, loving awareness, gives us a profound sense of our worth, precisely because it's given to us so openly, so generously, and yet with such deep, loving attention, and seems to be given despite all of our meanness, all of our distraction, and all of the various ways in which we realize we've been turning away from it for so long. Now the question arises about whether there's something that we need to believe, perhaps something that we need to believe about the existence of a divine being in order to make ourselves available to this experience. And secondly, a question about what the experience implies after the fact. About the way the world is. About, perhaps most pointedly, the existence of a divine being. Now, in response to the first question, I want to say, it seems to me that no antecedent belief is necessary, because what's involved fundamentally in exposing oneself to that divine unconditional love is a profound letting go of the psychical tensions by which one holds oneself in a certain familiar psychological space. A space that is so familiar that one might not even be fully aware of how one's holding it and what it would be like, of course, what it would be like not to hold it, because one really has no sense of oneself outside of it. It's so fundamental to one's sense, one's projected but psychological sense of who one is, that to let go of it would seem to let go of one's very life. Such that it can be terrifying when one begins to let go of that psychical asana, that internal way of holding oneself that keeps oneself in that familiar psychical space. And indeed, one cannot let go of that willfully. That insofar as one attempts to willfully accomplish this letting go, one simply reinforces one's own experience of oneself as a center of willful activity. In that case, surrender is not total. And only in total surrender does one make oneself so vulnerable. Does one find oneself so fully exposed to the gaze of that deeper awareness that one is truly open to this experience of bathing in divine love. And insofar as one has a belief about what might happen if one were to let go, that belief may be an obstacle then to this deeper surrender, because it may tempt one into trying to accomplish the surrender, in which one simply gets in the way. So if what's involved in being exposed to the possibility of bathing in this divine light is a profound and total letting go of the psychical tensions that hold oneself in psychical space, then believing in something about what will happen or why one would do that seems to be more likely an obstacle to the process than a support. And so it seems that no belief is necessary or even necessarily helpful. What may be helpful is to understand the way that belief can be an obstacle to deeper surrender, so that one can see the way that the psychical tensions involved in belief hold oneself in a particular psychical space and therefore limit one's experience in such a way that one is not fully exposed to the possibility in question. Now, secondly, we ask whether or not this experience implies anything about the existence of a divine being. Whether the experience of bathing in an unconditional love, the experience of knowing that one has always been bathing in an unconditional love and that all beings bathe in the same love because that love is the support of life. That experience puts one into touch with something whose richness and depth is so profound that no particular idiom, no particular religious or philosophical perspective seems to be able to capture it in its entirety. And on the contrary, even philosophical perspectives that seem on their face or to a kind of literalist consciousness to be contradictory seem equally fitting to that reality. The idea, for example, that experience of love is the experience of the fullness of God seems just as compelling as the idea that the experience is that of the radiant emptiness of one's own being. And that emptiness contains every possibility within it and was obscured only by a certain selfish delusion. And so it is that exponents of his widely divergent religious views as Christian mysticism and Mahayana Buddhism recognize one another. And recognize in one another the wisdom of the primacy of love. Namaste.